I stopped accepting invitations years ago, especially the kind that arrive without explanation. Experience teaches you that nothing good ever starts with silence. The envelope had no return address, no logo, no message, just my name, written carefully. Straight lines, no pressure marks. Whoever wrote it wasn't nervous. They were deliberate. Inside, there was a single card. Augusto La Cerda. Vale, Sombrio, Hotel. Friday, no return date. I didn't know Augusto personally, but I knew his reputation. Men like him don't gather people for nostalgia. They gather them to settle accounts. The drive to the hotel was slow. Rain reduced visibility to almost nothing, and the road narrowed until it felt intentional, as if the place didn't want to be reached icily. By the time I arrived, the storm had already done its job. Water was pooling near the entrance. Leaving later wouldn't be simple. Inside the lobby, the air felt heavy. Old buildings always carry sounds, but this one didn't. No distant television noise. No conversations leaking through walls, just the rain and the clock behind the desk. I counted without thinking. 6 guests, 6 keys, and a receptionist who avoided eye contact the way people do when they know more than they're allowed to say. Augusto greeted everyone personally. Firm handshake. Steady posture, calm voice. He didn't look like a man anticipating danger. He looked like a man confident he still controlled the room. At exactly 11:40 p.m., someone knocked on my door. The knock wasn't rushed. Not hesitant either. Measured. Precise. When I stepped into the corridor, the hotel was unnaturally quiet. The emergency lights cast long shadows along the carpet, and the air felt colder than it should have. Augusto's office door was open. He was seated behind the desk when I entered. That detail stayed with me longer than the body itself. People don't usually sit down before dying. They stand. They react. They try to create distance. Augusto didn't. His chair was aligned with the desk. His glass of brandy untouched. His watch stopped at exactly 11:40. Nothing was disturbed. That tells you something important. Whatever happened didn't involve panic. It involved conversation. Someone stood close enough for him to hear something he wasn't prepared for. Something precise. Something timed. As I looked around that room, I realized something else. Every person in that hotel had both opportunity and motive, but only one needed patience. Before we go any further, I want you to pay attention. Not to who speaks the loudest, not to who looks the most uncomfortable. Focus on who remains composed when the situation demands emotion, because in cases like this, the most dangerous person is usually the one who understands exactly when not to act. The Vale Sombrio Hotel wasn't built to impress anyone. That was the first thing I noticed once I had time to walk through the lobby slowly. The furniture was old, but not neglected. Clean, but not welcoming. Everything was arranged with intention, as if comfort was secondary to function. Places like that usually serve one purpose: to host people briefly, then erase their presence. I checked the guest book. No signatures older than 3 days. No names before that. Either the hotel rarely opened, or someone didn't want a record of who stayed there. I've learned to respect buildings. They always tell you how much truth they're willing to hold. The storm outside grew louder. Rain against the windows, wind pressing against the walls. The road was already unusable. Even if someone wanted to leave, they couldn't. That mattered. Isolation changes behavior. People become careful with words. They stop thinking about escape and start thinking about survival. I returned to the lobby and watched the others without speaking. Helena sat perfectly straight, hands folded on her lap, not tense, controlled. The kind of calm that comes from preparation, not innocence. Eduardo avoided the windows, kept glancing at his phone, even though there was no signal. People drowning in debt develop that habit. They keep checking for messages that never come. Marco spaced slowly near the fireplace, not nervous pacing. Calculated movement, like someone rehearsing explanations in his head. Laura pretended to write notes. But she wasn't recording anything useful. She was observing reactions, not facts. Journalists do that when they suspect a story is about to change direction. And Clara stayed near the reception desk. Quiet, still, watching everyone without making herself visible. People who work with confidential information learn how to disappear in plain sight. I didn't introduce myself as an investigator at first. I rarely do. Titles change how people behave. Silence reveals more. The receptionist finally broke it. She said the words carefully, as if reading from memory. Mr. Lacerda was found in his office. We contacted the authorities, but they won't reach us until morning. Her voice didn't shake. That bothered me. Shock usually comes first. Professional tone comes later. I asked a simple question. Who found him? She hesitated. Just long enough to matter. Miss Noguera, she said. His secretary? Clara nodded once. No elaboration. People who discover something traumatic, usually they try to justify their presence, their timing, their actions. Clara didn't. That didn't make her guilty. But it made her disciplined. We moved toward the office together. I paid attention to the hallway. The carpet showed no signs of hurried movement. No disturbed furniture. No marks on the walls. That ruled out panic. Inside the office, everything felt contained. Too contained. Augusto's body was still there. Seated, head slightly tilted forward, hands resting naturally on the desk. Nothing about him suggested surprise. I examined the room without touching anything. The glass of brandy sat near his right hand. Full. No fingerprints smudged from being lifted. People drink when they're nervous. Augusto hadn't been. His watch had stopped at exactly 11:40 p.m. Watches don't stop when people die. They stop when they're damaged or removed. But this one hadn't been touched. I looked at the chair again. Its legs were aligned perfectly with the desk. No backward angle. No sign of movement. It told me something specific. Whoever spoke to Augusto wanted him seated. Listening. Not reacting. I stepped back and watched the others enter the room one by one. Each reaction was different. Helena barely looked at the body. She focused on the descante papers, on what might still exist beyond death. Eduardo stared too long. Guilt does that sometimes. Or fear. Marcos looked at the door first. People who plan exits always do. Laura watched everyone else instead of the body. It told me she already understood the importance of witnesses. Clara stayed where she was, near the doorway. Close enough to see, far enough not to be questioned. The storm cracked outside, thunder echoing through the building. I checked the time, 11:58 p.m. Less than 20 minutes since Augusto died. That meant whatever caused this was still very fresh. I cleared my throat. Until the police arrive, I said. No one leaves this floor. No one argued. That silence told me more than words ever could, because when people don't protest restrictions, it usually means they already expected them. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't a spontaneous crime. This was a night that had been planned, not down to the second, but down to the moment when leaving would no longer be an option. You don't understand a crime until you understand the victim. Not who they pretended to be, who they were when no one was watching. Augusto Lacerda built his life around leverage, contracts, favors, silence. He didn't raise his voice often, because he never needed to. The people around him already knew what he was capable of doing with the information he collected. I went through the documents on his desk slowly, not reading, just observing. Stacked folders, color-coded tabs, handwritten notes in the margins. This wasn't a man who trusted memory, he trusted records. That told me something important. If Augusto invited these people here, it wasn't for conversation, it was for control. I started with Helena. She didn't look at me when she spoke. She looked past me, toward the window, as if the storm outside mattered more than the man who had just died in front of her. She said her marriage had been complicated. That's usually code for strategic. No raised voices. No public arguments. Just distance. The kind that grows when two people stay together for reasons other than affection. Helena had motive. Money always qualifies, but motive alone doesn't solve cases. It only narrows attention. Eduardo was next. He tried to sound calm, but his hands betrayed him. Fingers tapping the armrest, then stopping when he noticed I was watching. He spoke quickly. Too quickly. Debt changes people. It makes them defensive. It also makes them reckless. Eduardo admitted he'd argued with his father earlier that night. Over money. Over control. Over promises that were no longer being kept. That mattered, but anger leaves marks, and this room had none. Marcus Vidal presented himself like someone used to negotiation. Straight posture. Measured words. No wasted movements. He explained recent business setbacks without emotion, as if the numbers themselves had failed him, not his decisions. That kind of detachment is dangerous. It means someone has already accepted loss. Laura Reyes didn't pretend to be anything she wasn't. She admitted she was a journalist. She admitted she'd been investigating Augusto. What Sedinti had met at least not directly, was how much she already knew before arriving. People who ask questions professionally learn how to stay quiet when answers matter more. Laura didn't need Augusto alive. She needed him exposed. Then there was Clara. Clara had been with Augusto longer than anyone else in that room. She organized his schedule, his documents, his correspondence. She knew when meetings were real and when they were traps. That level of proximity creates two types of people: loyalists or liabilities. Clara spoke little. When she did, her answers were precise. No adjectives, no opinions, just facts. Dates, times, actions. I asked her what she'd been doing before finding Augusto. She said she was organizing files in the adjacent room. I asked which files. She paused. Just long enough. Old ones, she said. Archived material. Archived usually means forgotten or dangerous. I went back to the office and looked again. The desk was clean. Too clean. If Augusto had been preparing a revelation, he wouldn't leave evidence scattered. He would consolidate it. Reduce it. Keep it close. That's when I noticed something subtle. A drawer that had been opened recently. Not forced. Not left ajar. Just used. Inside, there was nothing. Empty drawers are rarely empty by accident. I thought about the torn note again. Witten's not a threat. A reminder. Someone was afraid of being exposed, and someone else knew exactly what that exposure meant. I returned to the group and watched them react to silence. That's when patterns begin to form. Helena filled the silence with polite concern. Eduardo filled it with agitation. Marcos filled it with logic. Laura filled it with observation. Clara filled it with nothing. Silence is an absence. It's a choice. I checked my watch. 12:22 a.m. The storm hadn't slowed. The road would remain blocked until morning. That meant time was the only resource we had, and time favors the prepared. I asked them all the same question. What were you doing at exactly 11:40? Their answers came quickly. Too quickly. Rehearsed timelines. Neat explanations. No overlap. No witnesses. That doesn't happen naturally, except when people believe they've already accounted for everything. I ended the questioning there, deliberately. People reveal more when they think the hard part is over. As I stepped away, I looked at Augusto one last time. He hadn't been surprised. He'd been confronted, and whatever he heard in those final minutes didn't provoke panic. It provoked realization, which meant the real weapon in this case wasn't anger. It was information. And only one person in that hotel had full control over it. What do you think happened next? Let me know your theories in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for the next part of the investigation. When you listen to people long enough, you realize most lies aren't bold. They're organized. That's what bothered me as I began reconstructing the timeline. Not the contradictions. There were none yet, but the efficiency of their answers. I started with the clock. Augusta's watch had stopped at 11:40 p.m. Not earlier. Not later. That gave me a fixed point. Everything else had to orbit around it. I asked each of them to walk me through the 10 minutes before that time. Slowly. No skipping. No conclusions. Helena spoke first. She said she was in her room, reading. She described the chair, the lamp, the book she hadn't finished. Her voice stayed even no hesitation. That level of detail usually convinces people, but detail can be prepared. I asked if anyone had contacted her during that time. No, she said. Immediately. Too immediately. People usually think before denying contact. Helena didn't. Eduardo went next. He admitted Ed. Then pacing the hallway. He said he needed air, needed distance from his father after their argument. His timeline was emotional. Fragmented. Angry. Anger can be real, but it can also be useful. He said he heard a sound at 11:40. A chair scraping. Something heavy shifting. That caught my attention. Marco said he was in the lounge near the fireplace. He claimed he was reviewing documents on his tablet. Alone. No witnesses. Convenient. He also heard something at 11:40. A muffled voice, not loud enough to understand, but enough to notice. Laura described the same moment differently. She said she heard a pause. Not a sound. A pause, as if the building itself had stopped breathing for a second. That was an unusual choice of words. Journalists notice absences more than events. Then I turned to Clara. I asked her the same question. What were you doing between 11:30 and 11:40? She didn't rush to answer. I was organizing archived files, she said, in the adjacent room. I asked, which room? She pointed without looking. Accuracy without confirmation is rare. It suggests familiarity. I asked if she heard anything. No, she said. Just one word. No explanation. No elaboration. Everyone else had heard something. A sound. A movement. A presence. Clara heard nothing. I didn't challenge her immediately. Silence works better when left untouched. I wrote down their timelines side by side, 5 accounts. 5 versions of the same 10 minutes. They were different, but compatible. That's when I realized what bothered me. None of them overlapped. No one placed themselves near anyone else. No shared moments. No witnesses confirming witnesses. That doesn't happen by accident. People naturally cross paths, especially in confined spaces. Especially during storms, unless they intentionally avoid doing so. I walked the hallway myself. Measured the distance between rooms. Timed how long it took to move from one end to the other at a normal pace. Less than 30 seconds. That meant anyone could reach Augusto's office quickly and return without being seen. Opportunity wasn't limited. I returned to the office again, alone. The chair. The desk. The positioning. Augusto hadn't been interrupted mid-act. He hadn't been surprised. Someone had his attention. Long enough to speak. I imagined the conversation. Not loud, not heated. Controlled. The kind of conversation where one person believes they still have leverage until they realize they don't. That realization can be dangerous, especially for someone with a heart that's already under pressure. I checked the note again. Torn, not crumpled. That means someone read it carefully before destroying it. People don't tear notes impulsively. They tear them when they understand their importance. I stepped back into the corridor and watched them from a distance. This time, I wasn't listening to words. I was watching reactions. Eduardo avoided looking at Clara. Marcos avoided looking at the office. Helena avoided looking at anyone. Laura looked at everything, and Clara remained exactly where she had been all night. Near the reception desk. Near the records. Near the truth. I checked the time again. 12:47 a.m. Still hours until morning. Still hours for people to grow tired. Sloppy. That's when I decided to stop questioning. Pressure reveals nothing if applied too early. Instead, I let them talk to each other. That's when people forget they're being observed. And that's when the real timeline begins to surface. Crime scenes don't speak. They wait. They wait for someone patient enough to stop projecting stories onto them and start listening to what's actually there. I asked everyone to stay in the lounge and returned to Augusto's office alone. The first thing I did was stand exactly where he had been sitting. Perspective matters. From the chair, the door was fully visible. Anyone entering the room would have been seen immediately. There were no blind spots, no corners where someone could hide and surprise him. That eliminated one assumption quickly. This wasn't an ambush. I placed my hands on the desk, careful not to touch anything important, and looked down. The surface was clean. Not whose did he deliberately cleared. Papers stacked, aligned, squared with the edges. People preparing for confrontation don't do that. People preparing for disclosure do. I shifted my attention to the drawer beneath the desk. It had been opened recently. Not forced, not left out of place. Used, then closed. Inside, nothing remained. Empty drawers tell better stories than full ones. They tell you something was removed intentionally. I leaned back slightly and looked at the walls. No signs of struggle. No scuffed baseboards, no displaced frames. Augusto never stood up. That meant he was calm until the end. I thought about the glass of brandy again. Full, untouched. Alcohol's a reflex. People reach for it when they're nervous, angry, or trying to delay something. Augusto didn't delay. He listened. I checked the watch once more. 11:40 p.m. I turned it gently. No resistance. No damage. Watches stop when their owner stops moving abruptly, when momentum interferes with the mechanism. Augusto hadn't moved, which meant whatever caused his heart to fail didn't come with panic. It came with understanding. I walked around the desk slowly, reconstructing distance. Whoever stood there would have been close, not across the room, not pacing, close enough to speak quietly, close enough to ensure privacy. That narrowed the list. I returned to the note fragments. Torn cleanly. People tear paper when they've finished reading it, not before. Augusto had read that note, understood Italiano, then someone else destroyed it. Not to hide the message from him, but to hide it from everyone else. That told me something important. The note wasn't a threat. It was confirmation. Something he already suspected. I stepped out and observed the others again. They weren't watching the office anymore. They were watching each other. That shift usually happens when people believe the danger is past. I approached Laura. Quietly, I asked her what she thought. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked me a question. Why would someone invite witnesses to their own exposure? That was a good question, because the answer is simple. Control. Augusto believed that if he gathered everyone in one place, he could manage the outcome, shape the narrative, decide what came out and what stayed buried. People like him forget something. Control only works as long as everyone still believes in it. I turned my attention back to Clara. She was organizing papers at the reception desk. Methodical. Unbothered. I asked her a neutral question. Did Augusto seem nervous earlier tonight? She looked up at me. No, she said. He seemed resolved. Resolved. That wasn't an observation. That was an interpretation. Clara wasn't describing behavior. She was describing intent. I let that settle. Then I asked her something else. Did he ask you to retrieve anything tonight? Another pause. Yes, she said. Old files. I asked which ones. She didn't answer this time. Silence again. I didn't press her. People who guard information don't respond well to pressure. They respond to time, and we had plenty of it. I stepped back into the lounge and addressed the group. We're not looking at a violent crime, I said. We're looking at a moment when someone realized the balance had shifted. A moment when another person decided not to interfere. No one reacted. That told me they all understood exactly what I meant. I checked the time again. 1:18 a.m. Still hours to go. And somewhere between those hours, someone was going to slip. Because no one can hold a story perfectly forever. When people believe they've said enough, they relax. That's when omissions start to matter. I stopped asking questions and started watching behavior. Helena moved first. She approached Eduardo, lowered her voice, and said something I couldn't hear. He reacted immediately, a sharp shake of the head, followed by a glance in my direction. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's corrective. Marcos kept his distance from everyone. He stood near the window, staring at the rain like it might offer an answer. People who rely on logic tend to isolate when logic stops working. Laura changed positions constantly. She wasn't nervous. She was adjusting angles, looking for reactions she hadn't noticed before. That told me she understood the value of sequence. Who speaks after whom? Who interrupts? Who doesn't? And Clara remained consistent. Same posture. Same pace. Same absence of visible reaction. Consistency can be a strength or a mask. I decided to test a hypothesis. If this death was caused by information, then whoever delivered that information had to know exactly how Augusto would respond. Not emotionally. Physically. I asked the group to sit, not because I needed order, but because sitting removes the illusion of escape. I addressed them calmly. Augusto didn't die because someone wanted him dead. He died because someone wanted him to understand something. That landed differently on each of them. Eduardo leaned forward, defensive. Helena crossed her arms, closed. Marcos tilted his head, evaluating. Laura didn't move at all. Clara blinked. Once, I continued, he invited you here because he believed he still controlled the outcome. He thought revealing the truth would put him in a position of strength. That was a calculated statement. People guilty of action respond to accusations. People guilty of omission respond to implication. I watched Clara's hands. They tightened around the folder she'd been holding, just slightly enough to matter. I asked a follow-up question, not to her, but to the room. Who here knew Augusto had heart trouble? Helena answered immediately. He'd been seeing a doctor for years. Eduardo nodded. Stress, he added. That's what he always blamed. Marcos shrugged. He worked himself into it. Laura stayed silent. Clara looked down. That was important. I turned to her. You knew, I said. Not a question. She didn't deny it. I organized his medical correspondence, she replied. Appointments. Reports. That changed the shape of the room. Knowing someone's vulnerabilities is different from exploiting them, but the line between the two is thinner than most people admit. I paced slowly, letting the silence stretch. If someone confronted him with information he wasn't prepared to hear, I said, they wouldn't need to touch him. I let that sink in. Fear can be enough. Eduardo spoke up. So what? You're saying this was an accident? No, I replied. I'm saying it was a decision. That distinction matters. An accident happens without awareness. A decision happens with it. I turned my attention back to Clara. You were the one who found him, I said. Walk me through that moment. She nodded once. I entered the office to deliver the files. It was seat. He asked me to close the door. That detail caught my attention. Did he ask you to sit? I asked. No. Did he raise his voice? No. Did he seem surprised? She paused. No, she said. He seemed prepared. Prepared. Again. Prepared for what? I asked her what she said to him. She hesitated this time, longer than before. I told him the truth, she said. That wasn't enough. The truth about what? She exhaled slowly. About the witness statement from years ago, the one he thought had been destroyed. The word landed heavily. Witness. The torn note came back into focus. Augusto hadn't been warning anyone. He'd been reminding himself. I asked one final question. When he collapsed, I said, "What did you do?" Clara looked up at me. "I called for help," she said. Immediately, another pause. No, there it was. A gap. Not large, not dramatic, but deliberate. I didn't accuse her. I didn't need to. I addressed the group instead. "There's a moment in every investigation," I said, "where action matters less than restraint." I looked directly at Clara. And there's a difference between not being able to help and choosing not to. No one spoke. The storm continued outside, steady and indifferent. I checked the time. La 1:56. Jaime. Fatigue was setting in, and fatigue breaks discipline. Clara stood up slowly. "I think I should return to my room," she said. Her voice was still calm. Too calm. I nodded. "Of course," I said, "but don't pack." She froze for half a second. Half a second is enough. Because when people realize the story they've been telling no longer holds, that's when they stop pretending. And that's when the truth finally starts to surface. By 2 in the morning, people stop performing. Fatigue doesn't create truth, but it strips away discipline. Clara returning to her room wasn't retreat. It was calculation. I didn't follow her. Instead, I went looking for something most people forget exists. Old buildings don't update systems often. They preserve them. Behind the reception desk, there was a narrow door marked staff only. Inside, shelves of outdated equipment hummed softly. Cables, switches, and a control panel that hadn't been modern in decades. The Vale Sombrio Hotel didn't have cameras, but it had sound, an audio monitoring system meant to detect emergencies. Fire alarms, shattered glass, raised voices. No one ever expects it to matter. I powered it on. Carefully, static filled the room, uneven and distorted. The kind of noise that makes people impatient. I wasn't impatient. I adjusted the timeline. 11:30 p.m. Nothing. 11:35. Footsteps. Someone pacing. 11:38. 11:38, then closing. 11:40. The static changed. That's how you know something happened. A shift in frequency. A pressure change. Silence, tightening before breaking. Then, a voice. Low, controlled. You promised this would never come out. Not shouted. Not emotional. The voice belonged to someone who already understood the stakes. Then Augusto's voice followed. Softer. Measured. I had to bring them here. A pause. You don't control this anymore. The recording ended abruptly. No collapse. No cry for help. Just silence. I stood there longer than necessary, listening to the static that followed. Sometimes you need time to let information settle before you move again. That recording changed everything. It confirmed what I already suspected. Augusto wasn't confronted unexpectedly. He was engaged. This wasn't a moment of rage. It was a conversation that had been planned. I returned to the lounge and watched their reactions as the audio played. Eduardo's jaw tightened. He wasn't surprised by the voices, only by the fact that they'd been recorded. Helena closed her eyes briefly. That told me she'd expected something like this, even if she hadn't known the details. Marcos leaned forward, interested now. Evidence changes priorities. Laura focused on Clara. So did I. Clara listened without expression. No denial. No shock. I stopped the recording. That sentence, I said, is the last thing Augusto heard before he died. No one interrupted. Whoever said it knew exactly what Augusto feared. I let the silence stretch. Because it wasn't a threat, I continued. It was confirmation. Clara finally spoke. He knew the truth would destroy him, she said. Not legally, publicly. Her tone didn't change. That mattered. You were the one who delivered that truth. I said. Yes. Alone. Yes. And when he collapsed, she didn't answer immediately. I didn't rush her. She inhaled slowly. I waited, she said. That was the first honest thing she'd said all night. I looked at the others. That's the moment this stopped being an accident, I said. Not when he fell, when help was delayed. Eduardo stood up. So she just stood there? He asked. Yes, I replied, because standing there was enough. Marcos shook his head slowly. She knew, he said. She knew what would happen. Clara didn't correct him. She didn't need to. I gathered the group closer. This isn't about hatred, I said. It's about control, shifting hands. I looked directly at Clara. You didn't kill him, I said, but you decided the outcome. She met my gaze for the first time. I was tired of cleaning up his messes, she said. That wasn't a confession. It was a motive. And motive, combined with opportunity and omission, is enough. I checked the time, 2:31 a.m. The storm outside was weakening. Dawn would come soon. And with it, consequences. I told everyone to remain where they were. Clara didn't argue. She simply nodded. People don't resist when they know the story is over. They resist when they still believe in alternatives. And Clara didn't believe anymore. Once the recording played, the room changed. Not in volume. In weight, everyone understood that the mystery was no longer about what happened, but when a choice was made. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone directly. That would have been unnecessary. What mattered now was reconstruction. Let's walk through it, I said, slowly. From the beginning, I explained it the way I would to a jury, not with drama, but with sequence. Augusto invited everyone because he believed confrontation would restore control. He thought gathering the people who knew his secrets would force them into silence. That was his mistake. He assumed leverage still belonged to him. Clara retrieved the archived files earlier that evening. Not randomly, not out of curiosity. She knew exactly which ones he would want to reference. The witness statement, the one he believed had been destroyed. She entered his office at 11:38 p.m. He asked her to close the door. That detail mattered. Closing the door wasn't about privacy. It was about containment. He wanted the truth, delivered quietly. They spoke. Not loudly. Not aggressively. The recording proves that. Augusto listened because he believed listening would allow him to respond. What he didn't anticipate was the shift. He realized the leverage was gone. Not later. Not gradually. At that exact moment, I pointed to the watch on the desk. 11:40, I said. That's not the time he died. That's the time he understood. I let that settle. Fear doesn't always cause chaos. Sometimes it causes stillness. Augusto didn't reach for the phone, didn't call for help, because people who believe they still have time often wait. I looked at Clara again. When he collapsed, I said, "You didn't panic." She didn't deny it. "You waited," I continued, "not because you were frozen, but because you were calculating." She finally spoke again. "I knew what would happen if I helped him," she said, "and what would happen if I didn't." That was as close to a confession as I needed. I addressed the others. No one poisoned him. No one struck him. No one pushed him. I paused deliberately, but someone decided the outcome. Omission is difficult to explain to people who expect action, but in law, and in life, omission is still a choice. I walked back to the office and stood where Clara would have been standing. Close enough to reach him, far enough to avoid touching him. That distance matters. She didn't need strength, she needed patience. I turned back to the group. Everyone here benefited from his silence, I said, but only one person controlled the moment when silence became permanent. Laura nodded slowly. "That's why the files mattered," she said, "not the argument." Exactly. Arguments leave evidence. Silence leaves responsibility. I checked the time again. 3:07 a.m. Dawn was approaching. The storm had almost passed, and with it, the illusion that this could stay contained. I told Clara the police would arrive soon. She accepted it without resistance. People don't resist when they've already made peace with the outcome. They resist when they believe the story can still change. Clara knew it couldn't. I gathered the others one last time. This case will be written as a medical death, I said. But responsibility doesn't end where paperwork does. No one disagreed, because by then, everyone understood the difference between cause and choice, and the choice had already been made at 11:40 p.m. The moment Augusto realized he was no longer in control, after the reconstruction, no one spoke for a while. That silence wasn't confusion. It was calculation. Each person in that room was reassessing their position, not in relation to Augusto, but in relation to the truth that was now sitting between us. People don't react immediately when they understand the outcome. They react when they understand the consequences. Eduardo was the first to break. "So that's it?" he asked. No one touched him, and still someone's responsible. "Yes," I said. "That's exactly it." He shook his head, frustrated. "I argued with him," Eduardo said. "I yelled. I threatened to leave, and none of that matters." "It matters," I replied. "Just not in the way you think. Anger leaves traces. Threats create witnesses. What happened here required neither." Helena remained seated, hands folded again, exactly as they had been hours earlier. Her calma denti cracked all night. I turned to her. "You stayed away from the office," I said. "Why?" She met my eyes, because I knew whatever was happening in there had nothing to do with me anymore. That answer was honest. Helena had made her peace long before this night. She wasn't protecting Augusto. She was protecting herself. Marcos finally spoke. He thought he could manage us. He said that if he controlled the room, he controlled the story. "That's a common mistake," I replied. "People forget stories don't belong to whoever starts them." Laura leaned forward. "That's why the witnesses mattered," she said. "He wasn't planning to confess. He was planning to intimidate." "Exactly. Augusto didn't invite people to hear the truth. He invited them to contain it." Clara had understood that before anyone else. I turned back to her. "You knew how this would end the moment you stepped into that office," I said. "Didn't you?" She didn't deny it. "I knew there was no version where he walked away untouched," she said. That sentence clarified everything. Not whether he would survive, whether she would allow him to. I asked her a final question. "When you waited," I said, "what were you waiting for?" She thought about it. "For certainty," she replied. "That it was over." Certainty. Not fear, not anger. Resolution. That's what separates accidents from decisions. I explained it plainly, because by then, no one needed soft language. "Clara didn't cause the medical event," I said, "but she controlled the window between collapse and intervention." I paused, and that window is where responsibility lives. The storm outside finally broke. The rain soft, the wind eased. The road would be passable within hours. Time, once again, was moving forward. I stepped aside and made the call. When authorities arrive after long nights like this, they're always disappointed. No chaos, no obvious crime scene, just paperwork and contradictions. But cases aren't built on drama. They're built on sequence. Clara didn't resist when I told her what would happen next. She didn't ask for leniency. She didn't justify herself. She simply nodded. People who regret things argue. People who accept outcomes don't. The others watched quietly. No one defended her. No one attacked her. That told me everything I needed to know about how they'd already adjusted their internal narratives. Augusto was no longer the center of the story. Silence was. I looked around the lounge one last time. Each person there would leave with a different version of this night. Some would soften it. Some would sharpen it. But none of them would forget it. I checked the time. 4:12 a.m. Morning was close enough to feel. And with it came the final part of every investigation. Not the arrest, not the report, but the understanding that some truths don't end with closure. They end with acceptance, because the most unsettling crimes aren't the ones where someone acts violently. They're the ones where someone stands still and decides that doing nothing is enough. The police arrived just after sunrise. By then, the hotel looked different. Not because anything had changed, but because daylight removes the illusion that darkness creates. Rooms look smaller in the morning. Secrets feel heavier. I gave my statement. Chronological, factual, no interpretation. That part would come later, buried in reports and legal language. Clara was taken quietly. No handcuffs in the lobby, no raised voices. Just procedure. People often expect justice to be loud. It rarely is. As the others packed their belongings, I watched how they avoided one another. No confrontations, no accusations. Everyone had already decided which version of the story they would live with. Helena left without looking back. Eduardo left angry, but relieved. Marcos left calculating what came next. Laura left with more material than she'd expected, and less satisfaction than she wanted. That's how cases like this end. Not with resolution, with redistribution. I stayed behind longer than necessary. I walked back to Augusto's office one last time. The chair was gone, the desk cleared. No sign that anything significant had happened there hours earlier. That's the unsettling part. Most crimes don't leave marks. They leave absences. As I stood there, I thought about how often people misunderstand responsibility. They look for action, for movement, for force. But some of the most decisive moments happen in stillness. If Clara hadn't waited, this wouldn't be a story. It would be a footnote. A medical incident. Nothing more. And that thought stayed with me longer than the case itself. Because it raises an uncomfortable question. How many outcomes in our lives aren't caused by what we do, but by what we decide not to stop? Before you leave this story behind, I want to hear from you. At what point did you suspect Clara? Was it early, when she stayed silent? Or later, when the pattern became clear? Leave your theory in the comments. If you enjoy crime mysteries built on investigation, logic, and human behavior, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. New stories are coming. Different cases, different suspects, but always the same question beneath them all. Who decides? When nothing is done, this story is a work of fiction. All characters, locations, and events were created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real people or real cases is purely coincidental.